It used to be that robot waifus and what have you were the dream of the future for a lot of men. But these days, increasingly, it appears to be that AI, namely Chat AI, will be the future, not just for men, but for everyone in every respect. Now, some of you might be familiar with Chat GPT, which is basically an AI that has fed loads and loads and loads, untold, unmeasured loads of data, and can have a conversation with you about theoretically anything. And some people have thought about this and thought about its potential as a partner, as it were. Primarily a partner for lonely men, or men that would otherwise get the dolls or the bot or what have you. And a lot of people think this is revolutionary, and in some ways it certainly is. But I also think there's some catches attached to it. Now, number one, for those who don't know, ChatGPT is this AI that basically can answer, at least in theory, any question you have, and in theory can also do your homework for you. People have had it write their essays for them in high school or university, and people will ask questions as simple as, how do you mix X cocktail? And it can put out pretty good answers usually. It's not perfect. I've played around with it, and depending on the topic, if it's not politically correct, it will inevitably veer in the direction of the PC and what is considered acceptable in polite society, but in general, it's pretty good. Of course, the applications of this are wide-sweeping, and for the normie, sure, having your homework done for you by it, or having an essay written, or asking how to make lasagna, yeah, that's a normal application. It shouldn't have a problem with that. But in terms of this potential of AI GF, as it were, because a lot of people are talking about this, I'm a little bit skeptical for a number of reasons. And let me say at the outset that although I don't think it's going to have a truly massive impact on the masses of men, and I will go into that in a bit, I do think it could have the potential to displace something else, namely online smut work. Now, online smut work really blew up during the era of the pestilence. Of course, it was already ongoing well before that, but it really blew up then. And there are a lot of women out there that earn their money vis-a-vis online smut work. Now, the problem with online smut work for the individual men involved who are paying and participating is that they must know at the end of the day that the person in question is not interested in them. And indeed, I found out that many of these smut workers have a team that is basically sending text messages and paying attention to various people who chuck donations at them. So they're not even individually preoccupied with their devotees and customers, as it were. Now, I could foresee a situation where highly individualized AI in terms of a GF that only paid attention to you, that didn't actually pretend in the most obvious way, could be an effective way of getting the attention off of online smut work. It's entirely possible. And it could also be that said men who participate and fund the online smut work would have a better time with an individual AI that is simply devoted to them. But then again, I'm also reminded of that film 2013 with Joaquin Phoenix, where it's revealed that his AI GF has in fact fallen in love with thousands of individuals. And that seemed science fiction at the time, but we don't really know what's going to happen now. I don't think it will go down precisely that way. So, is this a good alternative to online smut work, i.e. things like OnlyFans for the men involved? Almost certainly. The problem, however, is, and I think this is a recurrent problem, because back in the day people prophesized that smut bots and dolls would replace women and men would simply embrace that wholesale. It didn't happen. You see where the problem lies here. Well, most men aren't going to go for that option. Yes, there's a select population of men who, for example, pay for online smut work that probably would take advantage of something like a Chat GPT AI GF. Of course, you'd have to train it. You'd have to get it to be as accurate as possible. And I could see how someone could psych themselves into that. In fact, there are already such programs that exist. They exist in China. I think I've talked about that in the past. And they also exist in the West. They're just pretty primitive, all things considered. So for a select population, fine. And by that I mean, I don't think it's going to have some massive earth-shattering effect on the majority of the male population, because the majority of the male population was never interested in online smut work, and they're also not interested in theoretical AIGFs or smut bots or smut dolls. It's a very, very small population of men. And here's the thing as well. Consider the following. Imagine some hypothetical scenario where the AIGF basically becomes as perfect as possible. It perfectly replicates human emotions, responses, attitudes, even carnal preferences, you name it, everything. And it seems as real as possible. Well, again, for some populations of men, that's enough. They just want to have the thing. But as is typical, why in part do men chase after women? Well, a big part of it, obviously, is punani. It's just a driving force for a lot of men. They just think about punani nonstop, and the only way to satisfy that is to chase women because they're the ones who deliver the punani. But a lot of the reason why men chase after women, setting aside the punani factor, is the status factor. There simply would be no status involved in acquiring a chat AI GF. That just wouldn't happen. And so you end up in a situation where, again, the self-selected population that already participates in paying for online smut work or smut dolls or whatever, they're okay with it. But the guys who are normies, both in terms of looks but also in terms of their mentality, and especially go-getters and chads and what have you, there's simply nothing to be had for them from an AI GF because there's no status involved. There's no sense of astonishment, admiration. No one's going to say, oh, you got that 9.3 chat AI GF and it only costs you $20. Now, part of the reason, in addition to punani, men chase women is the status. And if you can get a quote-unquote good-looking girl or a high-quality woman, whatever, then it looks better for you. Then your status is elevated. And, of course, there's the thrill of the hunt and all this stuff. So the reality is that most men will not be served by something like Chat GPT or the equivalent, some kind of AI GF. They're just not going to cut the mustard when it comes to satisfying their innate desires. Never mind the fact that, here's the other thing, I mentioned punani. At this stage, you can't really do much with it. Now, I can imagine in some scenario, in conjunction with a smut doll, you could attach an AI of some sort, and yeah, you could sort of make it work. But again, that would be confined to a niche. It would be confined to a very small percentage of the male population. And on top of that, even the guys who could, quote-unquote, benefit from it, and this is not meant as an insult, but I remember that guy Pete that you always invite to gatherings stating that, yeah, even if it were an option, he simply couldn't believe it's real, and therefore he would discount it. You couldn't replicate it to the point, at least at this stage, where it'd be real enough for him. And I also think that a lot of men would regard this in a similar fashion. They just would think, well, it's not real enough, so why bother? Uncanny Valley and all that jazz. Maybe in the distant future, you could actually get a smut bot with perfect AI, with all the things you could ever want. And in that particular scenario, I could well imagine that some men, even normie men, would say, you know, this isn't a bad deal. This is more or less the real McCoy. I'm going to go for it. But we are far, far away from that. So I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, although, of course, I'm known as a Debbie Downer. But I just don't see a lot of potential in this for most men who want something akin to a relationship. I see potential, or rather a continuation of potential that exists for certain percentages of men who participate in various ways in online smut work or have acquired smut dolls and similar such objects. Anyway, thanks for tuning in as always, and special thanks especially to my patrons who support the channel and keep it going. You guys are the best. And if you don't mind, please engage in all that delightful YouTube jazz, you know, comment, like, subscribe, share, etc., etc. If I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. Everyone take care. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.